From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is U.S. Farm Report.
Welcome to U.S. Farm Report this weekend. I'm Tyne Morgan, and here's what's in store over the next 60 minutes. As citrus producers braced for the wrath of Hurricane Milton this week, farmers in southeast Georgia described the heartbreaking damage from Helen.
We lost all of our cotton, haven't we?
All of our cotton acres and our peanuts.
From row crops to timber to poultry, houses mangled in the storm. We show you the devastation firsthand. Is USDA's most recent net farm income forecast masking the brutal reality farmers now face?
Even with the really strong yields we're looking at this year, we're looking at a break-even price of $4.70.
And as farmers look to cut back, one farmer cut his herbicide costs dramatically this year.
That field alone saved us over $8,000 in chemicals because I only sprayed 18% of the field. And it was a 200-acre field.
We'll tell you how in Driving Tech. Plus, USDA's latest look at crop production. What was the biggest surprise? All of that more coming up on U.S. Farm Report. Now for the news, Hurricane Milton becomes the third hurricane to hit Florida this year, cutting a path of devastation across the state. The monster storm dumping record rain, devastating winds, and causing dozens of tornadoes to form. It made landfall near Siesta Key Wednesday night as a major Category 3 storm. The National Weather Service also reported the most tornado warnings ever in a single day in Florida. It's reported that Mosaic's Riverview facility in Tampa was dealing with some water from storm surge from the hurricane, but was looking to be back to full production later this week, while Nutrien's White Springs phosphate facility north of Tampa was still assessing the damage. As much as 42% of U.S. ammonia phosphate, 32% of U.S. phosphate rock, and half of the U.S. wet process phosphoric acid production capacity is located near Tampa Bay. 40% of all U.S. phosphate fertilizer exports and 27% of total fertilizer exports move through the port of Tampa Bay, with some market watchers saying the impacts of the hurricanes are going to continue to keep phosphate prices elevated. And fruit prices could also be affected because of the hurricane. Florida accounts for 17% of the nation's citrus production, with the center of the state serving as the highest producing region. World Weather says preliminary wind data suggests that widespread citrus fruit droppage could have occurred as a result of the storm's excessive winds. It also says the odds are good that flooding has impacted many fruit and vegetable crops that are produced close to the ground. In Florida, farmers in the state's Big Bend are reporting damages from Helen. The United Dairy Farmers of Florida estimate the damage to farm operations is at $15 million. The storm tore through a major dairy producing area of over 20 farms in 5 counties. It's reported those rural counties produce more than half of the state's milk supply. Meanwhile, dry, windy conditions continue to fuel wildfires in the west. This video taken near Sheridan, Wyoming, as ranchers work to move cattle away from the elk fire in the mountain face of the Bighorns. The fire started with a lightning strike and has continued to grow, reaching more than 75,000 acres over the weekend. When it comes to American ag trade, the deficit is continuing to widen. In August, U.S. ag exports were $13.01 billion. That's essentially unchanged from July against imports of $17.19 billion, down 2% from July. That resulted in a monthly trade deficit of $4.18 billion. So far this fiscal year, exports total over $161 billion compared to imports of just under $189 billion, creating an overall deficit of more than $27.5 billion. Since U.S. agricultural exports peaked at more than $196 billion in 2022, they have dropped by 11.5%. Well, from the hurricanes to the wildfires, weather has definitely been making headlines the past couple of weeks, but is a cool front on the way. Meteorologist Matt Engelbrecht joining us next.
U.S. Farm Report is brought to you by Pioneer. More farmers choose Pioneer brand corn because it delivers game-changing yields. Join a winning team. Pioneer brand corn. Your best year starts here. U.S. Farm Report weather is brought to you by H&S Manufacturing. Featuring 3 front windows and dual hydraulic gate delay, the top dog forage boxes make sure you get the most of every use. Learn more at the H&S website.
Time now for a check of weather with meteorologist Matt Engelbrecht. Matt, we are still assessing the sheer amount of rain and damage from the recent hurricanes, but for the rest of the country, it was hot and dry this week. Is that about to change?
As I look at that temperature outlook between the 15th and the 19th, we're going to see kind of a pattern shift to a more fall, autumn type pattern setting up across the United States. So you have some cooler air on the East Coast and the Southeast as we continue to recover from 2 storms. You got Milton and Helen. A ridge of high pressure bringing warmth back to the plains, a little bit in the Midwest as well between the 15th and the 19th. The one difference between this pattern and the one that we have seen through September and early October is that we're at average, if not a little bit cooler than average, on the West Coast. So we're starting to see that jet stream go up and down a little bit more than we have the last couple of months. And now the dry air is going to be out there the 15th to the 19th as well. A weak cold front's going to come through, pocket of dry air in behind it. So I'm not expecting much in the way of significant rainfall through the Midwest or even into Tennessee. The Southeast, where that trough sets up, we're expecting things to stay dry, but where it doesn't, expect some showers and perhaps some isolated thunderstorms, hopefully more for Miami than the folks that were impacted so badly by Milton. So when we look at what's going on with the jet stream, a more autumn type pattern is one where that jet stream is moving up and down and across from the west to the east, and not what's called zonal. And I'm not seeing much in the way of blocking pattern either. This is a jet stream on Sunday. So you see this soft U right here that's going to dig down off of this ridge onto the East Coast. There's the dry air and a pocket of cooler air. This isn't going to last long, maybe 2 or 3 days for the Midwest into the Northeast, because this ridge is coming in right behind it, and that is going to push out some of the cooler, drier air. Cutoff low is going to be possible into next week. Remember that a chance of some showers, chance of rain in Florida. That's the reason for it. Now by Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, our next trough starts to set up. So this ridge isn't going to be all that strong. As this one moves through, that's going to be kind of a clearing trough. It's going to cool things down. It's going to dry things out as well. So I'm anticipating, if you haven't already had your first frost, first freeze by the next weekend or next week, the impacts from this will cool things down. Our first real cold air for the autumn season.
Well, USDA was out with the latest look at not only crop yields, but also production forecast on Friday. It was their big WASDE report. So what were the biggest surprises? Well, Michelle Rook takes over the marketing discussion this weekend. That happens next.
Purchase with a Purpose is brought to you by Frontier Precision Agriculture, who knows farming success demands the best efficiencies and smart decision making. Get your field intelligence at frontierprecision.com/ag.
Welcome back to U.S. Report. This weekend joining us, Darren Fry and Jim McCormick with post-report analysis. And let's talk about corn first of all. A little increase in yield, Darren, by 0.2 bushels per acre. Ending stocks just below 2 billion bushels. Does it make a whole lot of difference, though, in the sum total of the balance sheets?
You know, not a lot. We're down a little bit from the last report, about 58 million bushels. Obviously, we came in a little higher than the trade guess. But the yield increase of 0.2 of a bushel was very manageable. And I think now it's going to come down to what we see happen in South America and what we see as we finish up harvest here. It's very accelerated. We're taking the crop out at record pace. And of course, that's put pressure on the market, the basis market. And we're going to see that ease here as we get past 75, 80% harvested. And we should approach that number in the next week or so in soybeans. Probably 2.5, 3 weeks in corn. So that's kind of how I see the report for now on the corn side.
So, Jim, do you agree with that? And also talk about the demand side of the equation, because do you think USDA has corn demand too high at this point?
Right now, no, I agree with it. I mean, for the most part, this number, Michelle, really wasn't that much of a changer. Your carryout just shy of 2 billion, 1.999, just below that psychological level is comfortable at this point in time. And for what the USDA did on the demand, I think they raised exports a little bit. I think they're very accurate at this point in time. You know, the real argument's going to be down the line of, you know, what does Ukraine get? Some geopolitical, aspects there. But the near-term aspect, it's all going to be about this harvest. We know there's a lot of corn that's sitting in bins from last year that got dumped late in the season. Elevators are full. We're hearing elevators are not even operating during the weekend. And, that's going to be the hardest part right now is where do we put this crop in the near term?
No doubt. Jim, what about corn imports to China, though, down 2 million metric tons? That could be a little bit of a game changer, too.
I think that's something we definitely need to watch. They were at 21. The USDA was projecting them to import 21 million metric tons. They dropped at 2 million metric tons, but that's still quite a big difference from where the Chinese have it. The Chinese have it only at 13 million metric tons. Now, if you look at the world balance sheet, it is, unlike the beans, kind of tightening up a little bit. It's not essentially bone tight, but it is tightening. But if all of a sudden the Chinese number is more accurate and they're only importing 13 million metric tons instead of 21, that will be bearish to the world balance sheet and that will be price negative.
Darren, let's talk about soybeans. USDA lowered yield only 0.1 bushels per acre. Should we be happy that at least the bushels didn't go up or the yield didn't go up?
Yeah, the yield didn't go up. A lot of people were expecting soybean and corn yields maybe to be up a little bit, but they didn't. And we still got a big crop. I think it would have been a lot bigger with a better finish. But we're hearing still that these later beans that finished under more dry conditions have taken a hit on yield. So we'll see what happens in subsequent reports. But the balance sheet is still way too large on ending stocks at 550. And I do think the export demand is still way too high from USDA. We're just not seeing enough Chinese business or export business in general to lower that number on the ending stocks down. And we could end up being 100 million too shy here on ending stocks. In other words, we get to January, February, and South America has a big crop. We could be running 650, 670 as we get into the spring and summer of next year. So Guy has to remember this balance sheet on beans could still swell from an ending stocks perspective.
Yeah, how concerned are you about that, Jim, in terms of especially this big Brazilian crop that's coming at us here?
I'm very concerned, Michelle. I mean, I think now that we got this report out of the way, the 2/10 really wasn't enough there. The problem is Brazil's weather pattern is shifting right on time. They're starting to get move from their dry season to their wet season. If they have a trendline yield crop, the projected carryout is going to balloon the world stocks to all-time highs. It's going to balloon the world stocks to use to the second highest level. And the fact is, that's not $10 beans. That's $9 and might even hang an 8 in front of it. And I think the market will grind lower, especially if it gets convinced that crop is there.
Jim, were you at all surprised with what USDA did with yield? Because there was a lot of talk about the late season heat and dryness, maybe trimming yields even a little bit more on soybeans.
They were very close to what we thought. I mean, exactly. The late beans had tailed off a little bit as in general. And in general, we're hearing the corn yields have hung in there very well. So I 100% agree with where the USDA is at. But like I said, it wasn't a game changer. Now it's really going to be depending on demand and South America production.
Yeah, where are the markets headed next now that we're post-WASD? We'll talk about that and where prices may head coming up next.
Purchase with a Purpose is brought to you by the Mighty Micro from Mosaic Micro Essentials. We put more in so you can get more out. Visit microessentials.com to learn more.
Welcome back to U.S. Farm Report. Our roundtables this weekend with Darren Fry and Jim McCormick. And now that we're past the October WASD, let's talk about some of the things that are going to influence price. Obviously, we're all watching South American weather, especially the Brazilian weather, because it's been dry, but we could see a shift, Darren. And if we do, how much price risk is there to the downside in beans?
Well, I think there's a lot of risk if South America goes ahead and produces a lot of beans. We know Argentina's grown a few more, and they've switched some corn acres over after all the leafhopper problems they had last year. So there's going to be more bean acres down there. We also know La Nina has an impact on southern Brazil and Argentina in a year like this, much like 17, and we could see problems down there with production in the southern part of Brazil and Argentina. But without those problems, we're going to have a large crop, and it's really going to weigh on prices. And I think what Jim said earlier, definitely in the low 9s, even high 8s, that's definite possibility. The one caveat to all this is war. War sometimes can bring prices higher, can dislodge supplies. And we could see war escalation, not just in Russia and Ukraine, but also with Israel and several counterparts over there as things have heated up recently. And so that could change the game. to more of an inflationary cycle for our grains if we did see things escalate. But outside of that, I think prices will head lower as that South American crop gets confirmed.
Yeah, do you agree with that, Jim? Especially when we start looking at some people saying maybe it's a little too early to be trading South American weather yet.
I think you got to look at it, Michelle. I think it's not too early because, look what the bean market rallied. It rallied over $1 here recently, and a lot of that rally was driven by two things. It was the funds getting out of position of this massive short that they were carrying, and that has to do with more economics. So I think they were trying to jump out due to the Fed cutting interest rates a 0.5 point. So instead of the Fed, essentially when the Fed's fighting interest, the higher, inflation, they wanted to be short commodities. Now they're kind of changing their tune. They want to be flat to maybe even long. But a lot of it also, Michelle, was the hype about the hot, dry September it was in Brazil. So I think we put some weather premium in. That's what the rally is. So now what we're going to do is slowly bleed it out over the next couple months. And like Darren said, the more the market gets confirmation that crop's there, I think you're going to see the sales move away from the U.S. and see more and more China purchases from Brazil. And I think that will turn the market sour. And I do fear there's a potential that we could even see more bean cancellations from China like they tend to do if they get confidence that the Brazil crop's there.
So Darren, we have had a big rally off of the August lows in both corn and soybeans here as funds covered their record short position. Are they flat right now? Do they have a reason to go long in this market, or what's their next move?
Well, I think they probably will try to get flat. I don't know if they're completely flat yet. I don't think they were as of last week, but they're closer. But I doubt there's any reason to go long unless we see something with war or something with better demand than what we're seeing now, or a crop problem in South America. Aside from those things, I don't see why the funds would get long. In fact, if anything, I think they add back to their short position as we go through winter and try to push this market lower as we come into spring and a big South American harvest.
Yeah. So the wheat market has had a good rally as well, putting in war and weather premium. Jim, is it possible that if wheat continues to move higher, if we get those geopolitical concerns Darren talked about, that wheat could help pull corn and soybeans higher or not?
I think if it does that, Michelle, it's got to be something very severe, like a real big escalation, maybe what's going on in the Ukraine, something like that. In general, I think the wheat's going to try to be the most positive market out there. But I think it's going to be very hard for it to move up because I do think it's going to struggle. If the beans break, I think they will pull the corn down on the ratios of the corn to bean ratio. And those two are going to pull the wheat down, I fear, more than anything else.
All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us. Jim McCormick with agmarket.net and Darren Fry with Water Street Solutions. We will have more U.S. Farm Report coming up.
Hey folks, welcome back to Tractor Tales. This week we're Ohio bound to check out a John Deere Triple Nickel D.
It's been a labor of love to say the least. I bought this tractor from a guy out of Manchester, Michigan area. He's a tractor jockey. He heard I was looking for an early D, and it just so happens he stumbled across one. This one was on an auction up around Detroit area. He got a hold of me instantly as soon as the auction was over and said, hey, he said, I got a D for you. So I didn't know he was thinking I even knew about wanting a D. He said, make me an offer. I said, well, send me some pictures and the serial number and we'll go from there. Half hour went by. I did all the research, looked up the serial number, and come to find out it fell into the category of a nickel hole D, which is a smaller hole on the flywheel. It was just after the spokers. Come to find out, we found out at the same time that it was a nickel hole, and he had already given me a price of what he wanted for it. Well, he's a man of his word. We've been doing business for years back and forth, and that's how I ended up acquiring this D for what he was asking. So I offered more money, and he said no. It had the incorrect fenders on it. They were all rippled and bent. The hood was rotted off of it. We'd end up going through the magneto and the carburetor, getting spark, getting fuel, and then it was a whole process of learning how these start, because these start different than your average John Deere. You know, you got to prime the cylinders, you got to set the mag, you got to set your throttle, and it took a lot of belt work with another tractor to figure it out and get it tested and tuned to where it'll fire right up now. The 100th anniversary of them was coming up, and I have no rhyme or reason to what I collect and buy, but a D, I wanted to be a part of everyone else in the celebrations and all the shows for the D, so I went on the hunt for a D, and I wasn't expecting something like this. In fact, I didn't even want a steel wheel D. Well, we got a steel wheel D now, and it's been a great tractor. The future for this tractor is to enjoy it. Everyone makes fun of me because I used to love plowing with this tractor. Put a pretty paint on there, and I don't want to plow with it. So we show it around, we take it around to shows. Someday we'll plow with it again when we're tired of laying out rubber and wiping it down and waxing it.
We talked about it before. If it weren't for improved livestock prices, the net farm income picture would look much worse. But what is the ugly truth about the farm economy right now? That's next.
You're watching U.S. Farm Report. Trusted, timely, tradition.
New numbers from USDA show that net farm income will fall $6.5 billion or 4.4% this year. That's compared to projections released in February, suggesting it would fall 26%. But if you talk to economists, they will tell you that those figures come with misconceptions, and the recent boom in livestock profitability is actually hiding what's really happening on row crop farms across the U.S. right now. It's that ugly truth that we're looking into for our Farm Journal report this weekend.
The hustle of harvest is in full throttle.
Harvest is really coming quickly this year. We've really only had one rain delay since we started. It's been kind of a blur, honestly, the whole time.
Lafayette County, Missouri farmer Garrett Reekoff started harvest in early September this year.
I have never gotten through corn harvest in my memory with only one rain delay.
And as for corn, well, yields are impressive.
I would say this crop probably is second best. There'll be some fields that are record breakers. This year, we're still 100 plus in those very poor areas.
As for soybeans, he's just started harvesting those, but his early planted fields are impressive.
I'm just ecstatic over an 85 bushel yield on a couple hundred acres. I'm beside myself happy.
Krista Swanson is the lead economist for the National Corn Growers Association. She says it's been nice to see corn prices continue to climb the past few weeks. What's providing that fuel? Well, she says nothing has changed fundamentally. But USDA's September grain stocks report did provide some help with a corn stocks number of 1.76 billion bushels.
While those are up from last year, it's important to note that it's still below where we were from 2017 to 2022. It's also importantly below the 2 billion bushel marker. That's sort of that threshold for being uncomfortably high. And it's also a lot lower than where the original projection for the 23-24 year was.
Still, farmer sentiment has been sliding, with the latest Ag Economy Barometer falling to the lowest reading since it was started in early 2016.
If you look at the Ag Economy Barometer in early 21, for example, people were quite optimistic. As soon as the input costs started increasing, and they increased very rapidly for production agriculture, the sentiment went down dramatically.
Input costs are a weight on balance sheets. And Purdue ag economist Michael Langmeyer says that means the break-even price for farmers is higher than the price of corn today.
Even with the really strong yields we're looking at this year, we're looking at a break-even price of $4.70. And so it's that combination of a drop in prices and the fact that input costs are relatively high that I think is explaining why sentiment is so low.
The latest Ag Economist's monthly monitor, though, showed a tad more optimism compared to last month. But compared to last year, economists are concerned about the ag economy today.
The margins that farmers are facing on average are really a tough place to be in. From 2022 to 2024, the cost to produce corn dropped 5%, but price was down 37%. And when we look at those average numbers again from USDA, looking at cost of production for corn, price, and yield, that comes out to $125 per acre losses on average.
The survey also asked if agriculture is on the brink of a recession. 75% said yes, which is up from the 56% who responded that way in the previous month's survey.
I think, yes, it depends on how you define a recession, but I define recession as this one of the worst years we've seen in the last last 20, and my short answer to that is yes. Just looking at where the price is currently at, this is about the worst year since 2007, which was the start of the ethanol boom.
The latest Ag Economist Monthly Monitor asked economists if the two presidential candidates would help or hurt trade. 55% said a Harris administration would hurt trade, and 86% of economists said a Trump administration would hurt U.S. trade.
That's why I get really worried, really with both candidates when they start talking about tariffs, is that's really uncharted waters, if you will. And we're already, the perception is that we're struggling a little bit with trade. As we enter these uncertain waters, we're going to struggle more.
Farm Journal recently conducted a presidential candidate poll among farmers about the two presidential candidates, and the responses differed from our economists' survey. Nearly 4,800 farmers responded, and an overwhelming number of farmers said Trump will provide more certainty on farm policy and crop insurance, is more likely to expand trade and address trade disputes, and is more likely to support policies that benefit U.S. biofuels. All right, when we come back, farmers in Southeast Georgia are picking up the pieces from Hurricane Helene. Emotions are raw, and we give you a firsthand view of that damage next.
Purchase with a Purpose is brought to you by the Mighty Micro from Mosaic Micro Essentials. We put more in so you can get more out. Visit microessentials.com to learn more.
Well, with so much happening here at home, we're taking a break from looking at ag around the world and instead focusing on the damage caused by recent hurricanes. Farmers in Southeast Georgia describe Hurricane Helene as the most catastrophic and costly hurricane they've ever seen, even worse than Hurricane Katrina. The Farm Journal Trust and Food team talked firsthand with producers impacted, and as Michelle Rook shows us, many of those were already on the financial brink before the storm.
The loss from Hurricane Helene was devastating for farmers in Southeast Georgia. A foot of rain and hurricane winds of 125 miles per hour ripped through Coffee County, which was the epicenter.
We were considered one of the hot spots for it because that was the highest recorded wind. We had 30 tornadoes also come through this county at the same time during the hurricane.
He says the biggest loss was to timber, as tree stands they've been growing for 35 to 40 years are completely gone, and it will cost $1,000 an acre to clean up and restore.
But our timber is probably 75 to, I've seen as high as 100% damage on timber stands.
Granthams also have 215 acres of peanuts to harvest and 1,400 acres of cotton that has been nearly wiped out.
We've lost all of our cotton, haven't we?
All of our cotton acres and our peanuts, we should have been already midway through harvest, if not 3/4, and we can't get into the fields, and they're saying the buying points, everything is down for another 3 to 4 weeks.
They also lost several cattle and over 100,000 chickens on their operation, and they're not alone.
It's about a 4-county area, you know. Coffee County, Jeff Davis, Atkinson County. There might be another county in it. I don't know for sure on that, but I know there's 598 chicken houses total, but there's 298 on the ground, you know.
Thousands of farms and homes are still out of electricity and water. Farmers in Southeast Georgia have met with state and federal officials with the message they need disaster assistance immediately.
We was already struggling before this, and then this just kind of added, you know, way more on us physically and mentally and financially. I mean, this is a financial burden, devastation.
He says it may take farmers several years to rebuild, and they may never be whole. I'm Michelle Rook for U.S. Farm Report.
Now, those farmers in Southeast Georgia shared their story in an effort to get the word out about how devastating the damage truly is. They said they have not seen or heard from USDA, either in the form of assistance or to assess the extent of the damage there. They are at a loss, picking up the pieces, and remain hopeful that help will be on the way. When we come back, were there any impacts to the fertilizer supply in either of the hurricanes the past 2 weeks? Chip's Corner is next. Welcome back to U.S. Farm Report this weekend. Chip Flory joining us with Chip's Corner. Chip, we just saw a package from Michelle Rook. Our Trust and Food team had boots on the ground looking at the damage from Hurricane Helene. Absolutely heartbreaking in Southeast Georgia, Chip, to see that damage. I know you had that conversation as well. But one thing when we look at the fertilizer market, you look at some of these production facilities, it was a close call with Hurricane Helene. They dodged a bullet, I know is how some people describe it.
Right.
What about the hurricane that we saw this week?
Yeah, the early assessment following Hurricane Milton, and this is a very early assessment, is that, again, Mosaic may have dodged a bullet. Now, that's not to say that they saw no damage, and that's not to say that there won't be any interruption in supplies coming from Mosaic there in Central Florida, but it doesn't look like there was any long-term damage done. Again, that's on the initial assessments. Now, leading into the arrival of Milton, Davis Michaels had a conversation with Josh Linville from StoneX about the situation on fertilizer and fertilizer pricing here in the United States. And even before the hurricane hit, Josh said the fundamentals are setting up for a high-priced year anyway.
Phosphate, it's high price. It looks horrible versus grain values.
Yeah.
But we don't see it really improving anytime soon. When you look at our NOLA DAP prices and you look at it as a destination and you start to look at us versus India versus Brazil, both of whom are bigger buyers on the world market, both those two values are significantly higher than we are. So we're already kind of a quote unquote discount. Inventories have been very tight all year. And now we've got this situation just a few weeks before the start of application. And I'm never going to sit there and say, oh, you're not going to be able to find it. You won't, it won't exist.
Sure.
Find it, but you might not like the price and you might not like the timeline.
Yeah, already at a discount here in the U.S. market. That's a little scary when we're looking at what all these input costs are doing to our break even on corn production already, Tyne.
Well, and Chip, you look at how fast harvest is happening in some of these areas. I mean, we could see some of these fall fertilizer applications come a little bit early. And our latest Ag Economist Monthly Monitor, we asked economists if they think that farmers will cut back on fall fertilizer. Check this out, Chip. 70% of ag economists said, yes, we do think farmers will cut back on fall fertilizer.
Absolutely. We call an extra application of P and K in those years when they are low price, kind of, a savings account. You can put it in the bank, the fertilizer bank, because it's going to be there when you need it. Now, the only way that you can monetize that is by cutting back in some years.
Chip Flory, you can catch him 2 times a day, every day, Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. for AgriTalk AM and 2 p.m. for AgriTalk PM. All right, when we come back, there's one farmer in Illinois that battles water hemp, and he was able to see a significant savings on his chemical bill, but it wasn't through cutting back on chemical, it was actually through a technology. We're going to show you how with driving technology next.
Driving Technology on U.S. Farm Report is brought to you by John Deere. No matter where your operation is with technology, John Deere can help you take the next step. Keep your farm moving forward with John Deere Tech to fit your equipment and your operation.
The biggest battle against weeds in northern Illinois is with water hemp. And as farmers try to find new tools to fight it, one farmer was able to do so by using less herbicides this year, as we show you in Driving Technology this weekend.
I've watched down the rows and I keep looking to see if there's any green weeds or anything I missed.
As Dan Hartman is in the rush of harvest,
There's a pretty big risk because those weeds that'll really sap your yield if you're pulling all that moisture, and especially on a dry year like this.
he's also scoring how good he was at controlling the heavy weed pressure that they saw this year. And with such a mild fall without many doses of rain, Hartman says the rhythm of harvest hasn't seen many delays.
Corn yield is surprisingly well for being as dry as a year we've had. We got in early. Corn yields are, I'd say, above average, so I'm very, very impressed. Bean yields are coming in right at average. I think everything kind of ran out of water.
The Hartman's farm spans across 5,500 acres of row crops and 7,000 head of hogs. 4 generations have farmed here, and it's Hartman who's always looking at what's next.
The last couple years, we've just now got into a self-propelled sprayer as of 4 years ago. We were looking to upgrade it because we saw the benefit in having a big self-propelled sprayer. To put it in perspective, we went from a 60-foot pull behind to 120 foot self-propelled. So it was quite the leap that we made.
Knowing a brand new sprayer was out of their price range for this year, they opted for a 2018 sprayer that had the exact apply nozzles with See & Spray.
I wasn't sure how to use it on our own farm. I didn't know how much it was going to be, how much our weed pressure was, because we've always just broadcasted things. And what impressed me was it didn't matter what I did, the See & Spray worked just like it's supposed to. I mean, it saw the weeds and it sprayed it.
Just like other farmers, it all comes down to dollars per acre.
So I actually ran the numbers already, and if I only used it on bean acres, it would pay for itself in a year and a half, based off data that we collected this year. I mean, that alone speaks volumes of what it's worth. And so that was really impressive.
Calculating the impact, Hartman says in one field alone, the savings was in the several $1,000s range.
We had a field of beans pretty far south of here, and I ran 2 residual passes, and then I came back a third time with just the See & Spray. We were spraying Liberty, and so Liberty cost per acre is pretty high. But that field alone saved us over $8,000 in chemicals because I only sprayed 18% of the field, and it was a 200-acre field.
The biggest battle with weeds in this area of Illinois is water hemp, and it's a yearly battle, one that can be hard to stay on the offense with.
From the cab, you're driving down the road, you can't see all the weeds it's spraying, and that's a game I would play. Is as I'm driving across, you see a weed from the cab, it's about, this big. It's like, all right, so I watch it go by the boom, and sure enough, it sprays it, but then it's spraying all these other things. I'm like, I don't know what it's seeing, but it's seeing something. I mean, we had really good coverage, so I was impressed.
With commodity prices hovering where they are today, every dollar counts on Hartman's farm. And so he says he has to be smart about every investment.
We're getting to the point where we're scrapping to save every dollar per acre or grow more bushels to counter off or offset the price of it. Our margins are getting tighter, so we got to find a way to make better use of our equipment.
And as harvest revealed the final result with what we'd survived and what didn't, Hartman is excited about what the cameras and machine learning with See & Spray can actually do.
I haven't really thought about what's next or the next. I mean, that See & Spray was a pretty big leap for us, so it's encouraging to see it pan out. So it makes us excited for the future. It's like, what else could we do, to take that next leap? So we just keep doing research.
Thanks to Dan for letting us come out and see the equipment at work. All right, when we come back, what is one key to flipping your soil? Michelle Rook rejoins us next.
Flip Your Soil on U.S. Farm Report is brought to you by Smart Nutrition MAP plus MST. Experience the most efficient system for delivering sulfur and phosphate to meet your crop's needs with Smart Nutrition MAP plus MST.
Farmers across the country are focused on lowering their carbon footprint and flipping their soils for something more productive. Farm Journal's Michelle Rook introduces us to a pioneering operation who's doing just that.
Tyne, many producers have implemented one or more soil health practices on their operation and have seen benefits and return on their investment over time. But one award-winning North Dakota operation is getting quicker results and payback due to their holistic approach to regenerative agriculture, which includes livestock. At Black Lake Ranch, Jerry Doan's mission has been to return the land back to its native state through regenerative agriculture and soil health practices.
We're 100% no-till, have been that way for 25 years. And so with these cover crops, these multiple species on the land, livestock on the land, that's a big part of soil health, is having livestock on the land.
In fact, he says integrating livestock is one of the most important and quickest ways to build soil biology and organic matter.
But in this part, it was pretty depleted. Might have been down to 1% or maybe 2% on some of that organic matter. And we're seeing it go in that right direction to, 3 or 4, or, and it's a slow process. So, but what's really fun to watch is that biology start to shoot up.
Yet integrating livestock may be the most overlooked soil health practice, and that's where NRCS comes in.
We're trying to reintroduce cattle into the crop ground and a holistic system. really looking at regenerative agriculture.
Another part of Blackleg's success, they grow 25 different species of cover crops on their land, year-round.
We use full season. They're planted in mid-June. They're warm season cover crops, and we're growing 5 ton of biomass, and you're grazing half of that off at least, because you have to leave something to feed the soil.
However, cover crops are tough to establish after harvest or any time of year in North Dakota due to the lack of moisture.
When we establish our cover crops out there, getting them big enough and quick enough, having the rain, that's a challenge, and there's not much we can do about that. But if we have a healthy system, we know that our soils, the water holding capacity will improve.
That's definitely true at Blackleg Ranch, where they've seen continuous improvement in soil structure and carbon sequestration. And that all helps producers and their families be sustainable for the long haul. I'm Michelle Rook for U.S. Farm Report.
Thanks so much, Michelle. Well, that's all the time we have for this weekend. We hope you join us next weekend. We are back on the road. It's our U.S. Farm Report Beck's College Roadshow. Our next stop, University of Missouri. Just so happens to be my alma mater, wearing the colors, apparently getting ready for next week. We hope you join us as we work to build on our tradition. Have a great weekend, everyone.
U.S. Farm Report is produced and distributed by Farm Journal Broadcast.